Welcome back to Big Frogs 4x4. Today we install Zone Off-Road shock relocation brackets. Start off with a cutoff wheel, or in my case I'm using a plasma cutter and cutting off the mounts. If you're using a plasma cutter or if you're using a cutoff wheel, make sure you do not cut into the axle tube itself. Cut away from it, and then you will follow that up with a grinder and then grind the axle tube down. Just take a hammer and tap her off. I'm using a flap disc, one of the I think 40 or 60 grit from Harbor Freight. Pretty impressed with them for their price point. I know there's better ones out there, better ones on Amazon, but for their cost and what I use them for, they seem to work pretty well for me. So at this point, you're basically grinding down what's left of the bracket and the original factory weld. Now you want to slide the new bracket, the raised bracket, onto the shock, and you want to locate the shock as close to the original location as possible. I wanted to keep my shock towards the inside of the U-bolt. That way the U-bolt doesn't have to run up through the middle of the shock like it does with the factory mounts. And I kind of ran it and lined it up to where the bracket itself lined and laid smooth on the tube and the shock was able to slide on. And obviously you push that up out of the way, and you want to get out the grinder, and then once you marked where the mount was, so you can grind down the axle tube there, you can see my marks, and that way you have clean metal to weld to. Basically I just try to stay right on that line, just wide enough for your weld bead to be laid down. Now bring your bracket back down, put it back in place, make sure it is seated on both sides, tight to the axle tube, and then weld it solid. Well, in this case, I'm going to tack weld it first, then I can take the shock off, because I don't want to get any of the sparks or the heat on that shock bushing. So I'll tack weld it in place, then remove the shock, and then weld it solid. Now I tried running a bead up on this side, and then I believe I run it down on the other side. I actually like welding up better. I have the exhaust removed. That made it a little bit easier to get my head in there to weld. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to remove the threaded stud there for the shock first before you weld it. That way slag doesn't get on your threads. I didn't have any issues, but you may, so I'd recommend removing that stud for the shock first, then weld your bracket in place. One huge advantage of these is it obviously gets your shock up off the ground, your mount, so it doesn't drag on off-road situations, dirt, sand, mud, whatever. But it also allows your axle to have more down travel if you have a longer travel suspension, because now your shock itself has moved up 3 inches. I put a small bead on the inside. You also have to make sure at full compression when your axle is pushed all the way up that you don't bottom your shock out. Well, now your next step, once you have that all welded into place and everything painted up, you're going to want to put your bolt in for your shock. You have your threaded end that you want to put through. And this comes with all the hardware you need. a lock washer on the back, and followed by your nut. This is a 22 millimeter, and the back one's a 19 millimeter. Lube this up with some antises. Once you have that installed, then you want to follow it up. Oh, I actually forgot. Now it's stuck on there. There's a large washer that goes on first. Then you put your shock on. Followed by your small washer, lock washer, and then your nut. If you don't drop it. And the nut is an 11/16. I don't ever run these on with an impact. For one, you don't want them breaking off like the stock one did. And two, I just go until I can see either the nut will bottom out or the bushing inside the spring will start to squash in some. Just hand tight. And that's how you install the Zone Off-Road Shock Relocation Brackets. Thanks for watching Big Frogs 4x4. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell if you want notified as each video as it comes out. And as always, God bless.